My name is Hannah Brooks. I was 32 years old, and for as long as I could remember, I had been the daughter my family never seemed to notice. Last October, I sent them the most important invitation of my entire career. My father's answer was simple. He laughed and called me a lowly teacher. My sister said she already had dinner plans. My mother didn't even write a response. She simply reacted to my sister's message and moved on. I stared at my phone for a long time that night. Then I typed 3 words. That's fine. What they didn't know was that 48 hours later, everything would change. My father would be sitting in an expensive restaurant when he looked down at his phone and saw something that made the color drain from his face. Because there I was. On national television. And millions of people were watching. But to understand how it happened, I need to take you back 3 weeks earlier. Back to the day everything began. The sun was setting outside Jefferson Middle School when I finished cleaning my classroom. Room 214 had been my home for 8 years. The walls were covered with thank you notes from students. Some were written in marker. Some in crayon. Some in shaky handwriting from children who had never written a letter before. I smiled as I looked at them. Then my phone rang. Mom. I answered immediately. Hi, Mom. Hannah, sweetheart, she said excitedly. Vanessa won her big case today. I smiled. That's wonderful. We're having a family dinner this weekend to celebrate. Your father is calling everyone. That's great. Tell her congratulations. I will. Oh, and Hannah. For a second, I thought she was finally going to ask about me. Instead she said, Vanessa is waiting for my call. I have to go. Mom, I actually wanted to tell you. The call ended. I lowered the phone slowly. On my desk sat a large cream-colored envelope. I picked it up again. The seal on the front read, United States Department of Education. I had carried it around for 2 days. I wasn't ready to open it in front of anyone. Inside was something most teachers never receive. I unfolded the letter carefully. Dear Miss Brooks. We are honored to inform you that you have been selected as one of 4 finalists for the National Teacher of the Year award. My heart raced every time I read those words. 4 finalists in the entire country. The ceremony would take place in Washington, D.C. The Secretary of Education would be there. The event would be broadcast live. I looked around my classroom. At the notes. The drawings. The little reminders that my work mattered. Maybe now my family would finally understand. Maybe now they would see me. But this wasn't the first time they had ignored something important. 3 years earlier, my parents had arrived late to my master's degree graduation. They blamed traffic. Later I overheard my mother telling my aunt that they had left early because they wanted to attend Vanessa's Law Association dinner. 2 years ago, nobody called on my birthday. 3 days later Mom texted me. Oh honey, was your birthday last week? Last Christmas, Vanessa announced a promotion. Dad opened a special bottle of wine. Everyone cheered. When I mentioned that my students had raised enough money to buy hundreds of books for the school library, Dad barely looked up. Then he asked Vanessa about her bonus. That was my place in the family. Always second. Always forgotten. Still, this felt different. I opened the family group chat. I rewrote the message over and over. The first version sounded desperate. The second sounded too casual. Finally I typed. Hi everyone. I have some exciting news. I've been selected as a finalist for the National Teacher of the Year award. The ceremony is October 15th in Washington, D.C. It would mean a lot if you could be there. I've attached the invitation. Love. Hannah. I stared at the send button. My finger hovered above it. Part of me already knew what would happen. But another part still hoped. I pressed send. Then I waited. An hour passed. Nothing. 2 hours. Nothing. By midnight they had all read it. Still nothing. I fell asleep with my phone beside me. The next morning I woke to a notification. Dad was typing. I smiled. Maybe he had changed. Maybe. His message appeared. Just a lowly teacher award. I'm not flying to Washington for that nonsense. I stared at the screen. The words felt like a punch to the chest. Before I could respond, Vanessa sent a message. Sorry. Ethan and I already have dinner plans. Can't cancel. You understand. She even added a smiley face. I waited for Mom. Surely she would say something. Surely she would defend me. Instead, a small notification appeared. Linda Brooks liked Vanessa's message. That was all. No congratulations. No encouragement. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the screen. The familiar ache returned. The ache of not mattering. Finally I typed back. That's fine. No worries. Then I put my phone down. I wasn't going to beg. Not anymore. I would go alone. That evening another message appeared from Vanessa. You should think about changing careers. Teaching isn't going anywhere. Just trying to help. I turned my phone off. I couldn't take another word. A few minutes later it rang again. This time it was my grandmother. Eleanor Hayes. The one person who had always believed in me. Hannah. Just hearing her voice made me feel better. I heard the news. I frowned. How? She chuckled softly. Education circles are smaller than you think. I smiled. Then she asked quietly. Did you tell your parents? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She understood immediately. Oh, sweetheart. Her voice softened. Then she asked. Did you read the nomination letter carefully? Yes. It mentioned the person who nominated you had recommended 6 teachers during her career. I sat upright. How do you know that? A small silence followed. Then she laughed. Let's just say I know people. My heart started beating faster. Grandma Eleanor had been a principal for 35 years. Everyone respected her. Even after retirement. Hannah, she said, I'll be at the ceremony. You don't have to fly all that way. Oh yes, I do. Something in her voice made me pause. Then she added. And don't worry about your parents. What does that mean? The truth has a way of finding people. Before I could ask another question, she ended the call. I sat there staring at the phone. What did she know? 2 days before Washington, Mom invited me to Sunday dinner. When I arrived, the dining room looked like it was prepared for a holiday. Good china. Candles. Expensive wine. Vanessa sat smiling at the head of the table. Dad stood and raised his glass. A toast to Vanessa. Everyone cheered. She had just become the youngest partner in her firm's history. The entire evening revolved around her success. Again. Eventually Dad turned toward me. So, Hannah, what's new? I knew exactly where this conversation was going. The ceremony is Tuesday. Oh right. He waved his hand. That teacher thing. It's the National Teacher of the Year award. Right. Cute. Vanessa smiled. So how much do teachers make these days? I sighed. Around $52,000. She nearly laughed. Honey, that's less than my monthly bonus. Dad nodded proudly. You see? That's why I've always told you teaching has no future. I felt anger rising. I love what I do. Love doesn't pay bills. My bills are paid. Barely, Vanessa muttered. Mom leaned forward. We just don't understand why you chose this life. I looked around the table. Not one of them understood. Not one of them wanted to. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan cleared his throat. He leaned closer. For what it's worth, he whispered, my third-grade teacher changed my life. For a moment I just stared at him. It was the first kind thing anyone at that table had said all night. Later, when I stood to leave, Vanessa smirked. Have fun flying economy. I slipped on my coat. The Department of Education is covering everything. Dad frowned. What? First class. Silence. The Secretary of Education will be there too. Nobody spoke. Because for the first time, they realized they had never actually read my invitation. I walked out feeling strangely calm. As I drove home, an email appeared on my phone. CNN wanted an interview. I read it twice. Then 3 times. My family thought this was a tiny event. They had no idea what was coming. And for the first time, I decided not to tell them. Let them find out on their own. Some lessons are stronger that way. The next morning I packed for Washington. My suitcase stood by the door. Inside were my clothes, my notes, and the speech I had rewritten dozens of times. Just before leaving, my principal called. Dr. Daniel Reed. Hannah, the entire school is cheering for you. I smiled. Thank you. We're having a watch party. My eyes filled with tears. The school cared more than my own family. Then his voice lowered. Do you know who nominated you? No. I think I do. I froze. The person who nominated you is a legend in education. My heart pounded. A woman. A principal. 35 years of service. Only 6 nominations. Suddenly everything clicked. Grandma Eleanor. The call ended, but I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than sadness. Hope. And as my plane lifted into the sky toward Washington, I had no idea that the biggest moment of my life was only hours away. Nor did I know that back in Philadelphia, my family was about to discover exactly who I had become. Washington felt like another world. A black car picked me up from the airport. The hotel looked like something from a movie. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Staff members greeting me by name. For the first time in my life, I felt important. That evening I met the other finalists. A science teacher from New Mexico. An ESL teacher from Michigan. A special education teacher from Georgia. All of us were nervous. All of us were overwhelmed. We laughed together over dinner. None of us could believe we were actually there. Then someone handed me the program for the ceremony. As I looked through it, one name caught my attention. Guest of honor. Eleanor Hayes. My grandmother. I stared at it. Guest of honor? Not attendee. Not supporter. Guest of honor. What wasn't she telling me? The next morning I found her sitting in the hotel lobby. She looked elegant in a navy blue suit. At 84 years old, she still carried herself like a principal. Strong. Confident. Respected. When she saw me, she stood and wrapped me in a hug. My girl, she whispered. I smiled. Grandma, what is going on? She laughed softly. What do you mean? You're the guest of honor. She motioned for me to sit beside her. Then she took my hands. Hannah, I've been watching your career from the very beginning. I swallowed. You have? Every student you helped. Every parent who thanked you. Every teacher who learned from you. I stared at her. You kept track of all that? I collected proof. My eyes widened. Then she smiled. 6 years ago I wanted to nominate you. My breath caught. But you weren't ready yet. My throat tightened. The nomination was you. She nodded. I only nominate people when I'm absolutely certain. Tears filled my eyes. Grandma. She squeezed my hands. Tonight the whole country will finally see what I've always known. Then she smiled again. And there's another surprise. What surprise? A former student is speaking for each finalist. I blinked. What? She nodded. One of your students is here. I sat forward. Who? You'll see. That smile returned. The smile of someone holding a wonderful secret. A few hours later, while I was preparing for the ceremony, something else was happening hundreds of miles away. Vanessa was having lunch with several lawyers. One woman mentioned seeing an article about the National Teacher of the Year ceremony. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh, that's my sister. Really? One lawyer asked. That's a pretty huge honor. Vanessa laughed. It's just a teacher appreciation thing. The women exchanged looks. National Teacher of the Year sounds important. Please, Vanessa said. It's not like she won a Nobel Prize. The table grew quiet. Another lawyer frowned. My son's teacher changed his life. Vanessa shrugged. If Hannah had real ambition, she wouldn't be making teacher money. What Vanessa didn't know was that one of those women had once been an education reporter. And she remembered every word. That evening my family gathered at a fancy French restaurant. White tablecloths. Expensive wine. Perfect views. Dad raised his glass. To Vanessa. Everyone smiled. Everyone celebrated. Meanwhile, in Washington, I stood backstage at the Kennedy Center. My heart hammered against my chest. More than 2,000 people filled the ballroom. Huge cameras pointed toward the stage. Bright lights glowed overhead. A production assistant smiled. When your name is called, follow the spotlight. I nodded. I wasn't sure I could speak. Then I looked toward the front row. There was Grandma Eleanor. Watching me. Smiling. The ceremony began. The Secretary of Education stepped to the microphone. His voice echoed through the room. We are here tonight to honor America's finest educators. I took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, I had already won. I had spent 12 years helping children. That mattered. Then my name was announced. I walked onto the stage. The applause was warm. Kind. Respectful. But then something unexpected happened. The secretary smiled. Before announcing the winner, each finalist will hear from a former student. A man walked toward the microphone. The moment I saw him, my eyes filled with tears. Caleb Turner. When Caleb had been 16 years old, he was homeless. Hungry. Lost. Now he stood before thousands of people wearing a tailored suit. A hospital badge hung from his jacket. He was a doctor. Caleb smiled at me. Then he began speaking. When I was 16, I had given up on life. The room fell silent. My mother was in prison. His voice shook. I slept in my car. I covered my mouth. I walked into Miss Brooks's classroom believing my future was already over. His eyes found mine. But she saw something nobody else saw. Tears rolled down his cheeks. She noticed when I was hungry. The audience listened carefully. She noticed when I wore the same clothes every day. His voice cracked. She helped me apply for scholarships. I felt tears running down my own face. When I got accepted into medical school, she was the first person I called. He paused. Then smiled. Not because she was my teacher. The room was completely silent. Because she was the first adult who believed I could become something. A sob escaped my throat. Caleb wiped his eyes. Miss Brooks didn't save my life with one big moment. His voice grew stronger. She saved it through thousands of small acts of kindness. He smiled. I'm a doctor today because of her. The audience exploded into applause. People stood. 2,000 people on their feet. Clapping for a middle school teacher. Clapping for me. I couldn't stop crying. When the applause finally ended, the secretary returned to the stage holding an envelope. The room became silent again. My heart pounded. The other finalists sat beside me. Everyone looked nervous. The secretary broke the seal. The 2024 National Teacher of the Year is... Silence. Then... Hannah Brooks of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The ballroom erupted. I froze. I couldn't move. One of the other finalists laughed through tears and gently pushed me forward. Go. I walked toward the stage. The lights blurred. The applause thundered around me. The secretary shook my hand. A crystal trophy was placed in my arms. I looked into the audience. Grandma Eleanor was crying openly, smiling through tears. For the first time in my life, I felt completely seen. At that exact moment, everything changed. Back in Philadelphia, Dad glanced at his phone. A breaking news notification appeared. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the photograph. His hand froze. Mom noticed immediately. What is it? Dad couldn't answer. He simply handed her the phone. Mom looked down. Then her face turned white. Oh my God. Vanessa grabbed the phone. The wine glass slipped from her hand. Red wine spilled across the tablecloth. The photo showed me shaking hands with the Secretary of Education. National Teacher of the Year. CNN. Live broadcast. Millions watching. Vanessa stared at the screen. No. Dad looked stunned. The Secretary of Education. Mom whispered. That's Hannah. Ethan leaned closer. His face remained calm. I told you this was important. Nobody answered. For the first time, they realized they had never taken the time to understand my success. Back in Washington, I stepped to the microphone. The speech I had prepared sat untouched. I ignored it. Instead, I spoke from my heart. Growing up, I was told teaching wasn't a real career. The room became quiet. I was told success meant money. I paused. I was told teachers were people who couldn't do anything else. People listened carefully. Then I looked directly at my grandmother. But one person never stopped believing in me. The camera turned toward her. Grandma Eleanor pressed a hand against her heart. My grandmother taught me that success is measured by lives changed. My voice trembled. Not salaries. Tears filled her eyes. Not titles. I smiled. But by kindness. The audience nodded. I thought about Caleb. I thought about every student I had ever taught. Then I looked directly into the camera. And to anyone who has ever been told they aren't enough. My voice grew stronger. You are. The room exploded into applause. Another standing ovation. 3 full minutes. I never mentioned my parents. I didn't need to. Everyone knew. That night my phone filled with missed calls. Dad. Mom. Vanessa. Over and over. I ignored every one. Hours later, Grandma Eleanor visited my hotel room. She sat beside me and smiled. Do you want to talk to them? I shook my head. Not tonight. She nodded. That's okay. For a moment we sat quietly. Then I whispered. I just wanted them to show up once. She squeezed my hand. I know. Tears slipped down my face. But tonight proved something important. What? You never needed their approval to be extraordinary. A week later, the consequences began. Dad's friends asked why he missed the ceremony. Mom's friends asked the same question. Vanessa's situation became even worse. The lawyer who heard her comments posted about them online. Screenshots spread everywhere. People discovered how she had mocked my career before pretending to support me. Her reputation suffered. Clients noticed. Coworkers noticed. Everyone noticed. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet my family. We sat together in their living room. The atmosphere felt heavy. Nobody smiled. Dad cleared his throat. "We need to talk." I remained standing. "What happened?" I asked. "I won an award." Dad frowned. "Hannah. You laughed at me." Silence. Mom looked down. We didn't understand how important it was. I stared at her. "I sent you the invitation." No answer. Vanessa crossed her arms. "We made a mistake." I shook my head. "No." Everyone looked at me. "A mistake is forgetting something." My voice remained calm. "What you did was a choice." The room fell silent. For years I had waited for their approval. Now I finally understood I didn't need it. I looked at each of them. "I'm done trying to earn your respect." Mom began crying. Dad looked shocked. Vanessa looked angry. But I continued. I spent 32 years trying to prove my life mattered. I took a deep breath. "I'm done." Dad stood. "Hannah, don't be ridiculous." I met his eyes. "I'm not." Then I told them the truth. I would no longer accept being treated like an afterthought. I would set boundaries. I would choose when to visit. When to call. When to engage. For once, my life would belong to me. Not to their opinions. When I finished speaking, nobody had an answer. I walked to the front door. Then I turned around one last time. "If you want to be part of my life, you need to see me for who I am." Tears filled Mom's eyes. Dad remained silent. Vanessa looked away. I opened the door. Cool air rushed inside. Then I stepped outside and left. 6 months later, my life looked very different. I had moved into a larger apartment. The award money helped me buy a beautiful home. The photo of Grandma Eleanor and me hung proudly on the wall. Caleb called one morning with exciting news. He had matched into a top surgical program. I cried tears of joy. The school celebrated my success. Parents thanked me. Students hugged me. I spoke at national conferences. I even visited the White House. The president shook my hand and thanked me for my work. My family still called occasionally. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I didn't. The difference was simple. I no longer needed them to tell me I mattered. Because I already knew. One spring morning, a letter arrived. It was from Dad. Inside were simple words. "Hannah. I was wrong. About your career. About success. About you. I'm sorry." I set the letter down gently. 6 months earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they simply brought peace. Not because he finally understood. But because I had finally learned my worth without needing him to. And that was the greatest victory of all. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?